I've bought a 3D printed model of the DL44 blaster off of eBay. It's cost me £23.50 and I'm amazingly pleased with the quality of it. I mean, this is really, really nice. The surface finish has got this slight striation from the printing, but it's really well executed. These parts come apart. The body's really nice, the hammer action's really good. It comes with the scope and the mount points. So I'm going to put this together, and I've already made a start. There's the handle, and I've actually glued that with Yoo-Hoo glue, and that is solid as everything. I really like he's actually put the screw hole in, so I can put a real screw in there and make it look authentic. I've got one slight thing to trim off, this little piece here. For some reason that's been left off, but I can take that off with a Stanley knife without any problem. I've just stuck a Stanley blade in here, and you can see that it just peels off. So I'll just peel that back and chamfer it, and that will be fine. The tolerances on this kit are very close, so I'm just using a rat tail file just to reduce that slightly so that it fits in a bit more easily. Otherwise it's an interference fit. Once you put it in, it doesn't want to come back out. But I need to be able to put a little bit of glue on there so that it holds itself together forever. So this is just push fit at the moment, and you can see that the tolerance is really, really good. It's really high. So with a tiny dab of Yoo-Hoo on there, and I won't have to do that again. These parts are such a close fit that I've had to carefully file this down in order that it will fit in its socket there, and I've had to carefully file this down in order that it will fit in its little socket there. Now all these things are so sharply made that you need to round all the edges and give each bit a slight radius, but when it does go together, it goes together absolutely perfectly, and you need the minimum of glue, just a tiny smear. So I put the back piece on, and I'm just about to put the top piece on, and you can see that it is a very close fit. It just clicks together. I need to manipulate it so it fits together. Now remember, there will be a line across here because the whole barrel in real life slides backwards and forwards. So it's just a matter of squeezing it all down and getting it exactly right, which I'll do. So I've just put a couple of these cheap clamps on there, let that set, and then we'll move on to the next part. Again, I've used the tiniest smears of glue, and this piece actually slides in that way and then connects up to make that joint. It's really satisfying, the fit on this model. I'm really impressed with this. While the gun body is drying, I'm going to put together the sight mount, and one of the things I've noticed is that this part is slightly too large for its slot, so I need to file the ends down to make that fit correctly. So I've filed it down to get a perfect fit, and as you can see there's no gaps or anything here. One of the clever things the maker has done is that anything that is actually the byproduct of the printing, like this surface here, it's always faced inwards to a point where you can't actually see it as part of the prop. So any kind of rough surfaces, defects are actually invisible once you put it together. I suppose you could spend ages smoothing this all out and making it look perfect, but what's the point when it can't be seen? Again, just using these little cheap clamps to hold it in place while it sets. These clamps are brilliant actually. I think these ones came from Lidl and cost £2.50 for 3. I've had them for years and they're just fantastic for model making. Worth looking out for. Well, this part is the only failure in this model. This is obviously the end of the sight and it's supposed to join onto the sight body, but the hole is smaller than the spigot. It's almost as though they reversed the programming, so that should have been smaller than the hole. I will need to file this down to make it fit. Alternatively, I could just saw it off and glue it on flush, but I think I'll probably file it down. This plastic is remarkably tough and takes ages to file, so I've actually whittled it down with a Stanley knife, and you can see that in some places it's really quite thin. However, it now fits perfectly into there. So just pop that into there, I'll put some glue in there, clamp it up, and that will be that piece assembled. The scope bracket is now together, and I need to figure out, using pictures, where on the gun that is actually mounted, because there's no indication on this model. So onto the internet to get a source. So you see this blank piece here, you line the end of it up with that, and that is exactly where it's supposed to go. If we look at this one, almost a perfect replica. Because this bracket is one of the most delicate parts and also has to take some weight, I've left the glue to set all night under the clamps. I don't want it to peel itself off. Well, I've got to the point where I'm going to paint the gun now, and I want the sight to have a different finish to the gun, because I've noticed that in real life the sight is a much smoother, much blacker component than the actual gun. So I'm going to use two different kinds of paint. I'm also going to underpaint in silver and then scrape through to get the worn effect, rather than doing it the other way around, which is the dry brush effect. So I've underpainted the flash hider in silver paint, same colour as my X-Type Jag, and I've also done some of the body in silver in the places where I expect to scrape back in order to get the worn finish. That's actually dried really quickly, so I'm now then going to paint that. I'm painting the scope with car paint, gloss black, and that's a really difficult shape, so I have to let it set, turn over, let it set, let turn over, let it set, and I shall do numerous coats. And then I'm actually going to do the gun with this stuff, which is quick colour multi-surface paint. So this isn't car paint, this is something I've bought out of B&Q, which is a quick dry and spray paint for interior and exterior projects. So I'm hoping that will give a nice plasti dip type finish. Well, that's the first coat, gone straight on, still very wet. It tends to go to a very bright finish, which I may have to dull down later on. I don't want it to look like a plastic toy. And in places I haven't bothered to go over the silver completely, I've just put some black finish on here and there, which I can then work back. I think probably 2 to 3 coats. So I've painted the scope and the body of the gun with two different kinds of black, and you'll see from the light that it's extremely shiny, and I don't want it to be shiny, it looks too much like a toy. So what you can do is you can get some wire wool and you can just gently draw it off and soften it off and get a different finish. I've started doing that on the other side, and you'll see that these are starting to soften. This is all started to look a lot more matte and a lot more realistic. Now, the problem with guns, of course, is they're made out of gunmetal, and gunmetal is a very complicated colour. It's lots of blues and browns and silvers, and to actually replicate it, I think it's probably near impossible. So I've dragged back all the parts that look like they should be naturally worn. The flash hider has come out really nicely because of the way I've used the silver and the black together. You have to imagine it being pulled in and out of its holster, where are the wear points, what it's going to look like. And I'm not going to overdo it, because obviously when it does get used it will get marked anyway. So the next thing to do is to paint the handle, and I can also attach the scope. Now I'm going to do something that's probably regarded as evil, but I'm actually going to put the scope on the opposite way round. And I'm purely doing this to make it look like it's my gun and not any other gun. Also, this is an optical scope in real life, and it would have never have been used as that. I am going to use it as a laser targeting device, so that when you point at something it shows you what to shoot at and you can't miss. The printed handle already has a texture in it, so I can exploit that to make it look like wood. And I'm just going to use acrylic paints that I've borrowed from my daughter in 2 colours and carefully work those in and try and get the effect that I'm after. So the gun's now completely finished. I've added a screw into the handle, I've textured the wood handle, and I've then weathered the wearing parts, the parts that I think the surface would be drawn back off it, taking the gun in and out of the holster, so any of the parts that are actually raised. And to do that I've used Sharpie pins. These are brilliant because you can just apply a strike in exactly the right place, quickly rub it over with your thumb and you get this excellent effect. The scope has a brass bezel on both ends, so I've done that again with a Sharpie. I haven't tried to overdo that because you can easily mess it up. And I think I'm very happy with this as a prop. This has come out really nicely. I think also probably amazing value for £23.50.